What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another deck profile, and today I'm actually bringing a bit of a weird one. I have Odd Eyes Crusadia in front of me. It's basically an Odd Eyes deck with a little bit of Crusadia stuff splashed in. It gives you the link arrows for your Pendulum Summon, and the whole Master Rule 5 thing kind of does change how you have to play your it doesn't really change how you have to play them, or how you have to play some of your extra deck, but it does give you flexibility with your extra deck monsters like your Fusion Xyzs and Synchros. So, the Crusadias are more of just there to make link arrows for your Pendulum monsters, and they can make you push for an OTK. So, let's get right on into this. And starting us off, we have 3 copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. Yes, I do have the Platinum Secret Rare ones. I didn't really start getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't remember when I started getting into it, but I traded for these off of a friend, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this pure Odd Eyes deck. I never really got around to finishing it, and then I was like, wait, I can splash Crusadia in here. Like, when Link format came around, I was like, I can splash Crusadias in here and actually do stuff, especially after Electromite got lost for Pendulum decks. Oh, yeah. Anyways, his Pendulum effect is you can reduce any battle damage you take from a battle involving a Pendulum monster to 0. And then during the end phase, if this card is in your scale, you can destroy it in your scale and then add a Pendulum monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. And then he does double battle damage, I believe. Yeah, and if it battles a monster, it does double battle damage. And on a 2500 body, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's also a level 7 Dark Dragon monster. And, its search effect is pretty good, and the fact that when it's destroyed, it just goes to the extra deck. That's what I love about Pendulums, is they go to the extra deck rather than the graveyard. Next up, we have 3 copies of Odd Eyes Phantom Dragon. God, I actually never really read this guy's effects because I only really use him for, like, Xyz, Link, or Synchro material. But his scale effect is when an attack is declared involving once per turn when an attack is declared involving your face-up monster or an opponent's monster. If you have an Odd Eyes card in your other Pendulum Zone, you can make that monster gain 1200 attack until the end of the battle phase, even if he leaves the field. And then he has a burn effect that whenever he's Pendulum Summoned, or whenever this Pendulum Summoned card inflicts battle damage, you can inflict damage equal to the number of Odd Eyes cards in your scale times 1200, and then that's a hard once per turn. His other effect is a soft once per turn. So, yay. Attack, boost, and burn. Let's go. It's actually not a bad card. Next up, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes Mirage Dragon. Just a scale 8 that's got really long text. Its scale effect is once per turn if a face-up Odd Eyes Pendulum monster or monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect. You can destroy 1 card in your Pendulum Zone, and if you do, place 1 face-up Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from your extra deck in your Pendulum Zone except for himself. So basically, you have him in your scale, something you control dies, you activate the scale effect, pop itself, and then replace the scale, which is really nice. And then he has a monster effect that says during either player's turn, while an Odd Eyes card is in your Pendulum Zone, you can target 1 Odd Eyes monster you control the first time it would be destroyed by battle or card effect. This turn it is not destroyed, and then that's a hard once per turn. So he gives you protection against being destroyed for a turn, or for 1 card on a quick effect. Yeah, it is during either player's turn. So he can change himself out of the scale, and while he's on the board, he can make something indestructible for one card effect or one battle. So, not bad. Next up, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes Arc Pendulum Dragon. It's a vanilla monster it's a vanilla monster, but its scale effect is actually really good, and it's whenever an Odd Eyes card or card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon an Odd Eyes monster from the deck. And you can only use this effect of this card once per turn. So hard once per turn on this. But summoning an Odd Eyes monster straight out of the deck, I mean, like, you have a variety of things you can summon. It's just a really, really good card. We have 2 copies of Oath Dragon Magician. There is a deck that I'm planning on making, and I'm probably going to order a booster box of a certain set to make it. And I'll definitely probably open that, I'll definitely open it on the channel if I get the chance to. But, his effect is, if you have a Magician card in your other Pendulum Zone, target a face-up Magician or Odd Eyes Pendulum in your extra deck, and then add it to your hand, except for himself, and then you can only do that as a hard once per turn. Then his monster effect is if it's normal or special, you can target one Magician Pendulum monster or Odd Eyes monster in your graveyard, except himself, and add it to your hand. So basically, let's say your opponent strikes a summon of an Odd Eyes monster, or, you know, it's something like you have an Odd Eyes monster in your graveyard. Pendulum summon this, find a way to normal summon it, special summon it in any way, and you get that monster back. So it's not bad. It's a recovery card, so it's also a 2 scale, which is really nice. So right here we have a 2 to 8, 2 to 8. Most of the time you're gonna have 4 to 8. But on rare occasions, you'll have those nice low scales. Next up, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes Persona Dragon. I'm going to go over his monster effect first, and it's a quick effect to target a monster summoned from the extra deck and negate its effects. I believe. No, just one. Yeah, special summon from the extra deck, and its effects are negated until the end of this turn. Soft once per turn, so if you get both copies of this out, you get to negate 2 monsters summoned from the extra deck. Then its scale effect is so much fucking text. Once per turn during the end phase, if your opponent activated a card or effect this turn that targeted an Odd Eyes Pendulum monster you controlled and no other cards, while this card was in your Pendulum Zone, special summon this card, and if you do, place 1 face-up Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from your extra deck into the Pendulum Zone. So basically, if your opponent activates something that specifically targets a Odd Eyes Pendulum monster, during the end phase, pop this, replace the scale, but, you know, it's a 1 scale, so you want it in your scale. You do not want it out of your scale. And into our one-ofs, we have 1 Performance Pal Odd Eyes Dissolver. It fusion summons, basically is what all of this text says. The monster effect side can use stuff in your Pendulum Zones, and then the Pendulum effect is basically polymerization. You can once per turn summon fusion summon using cards on the field or hand, and that's really it. So yeah, it just fusion summons. It can use itself as a monster, so you know it's okay for fusion summoning. Next up we have Noble Dragon Magician. There's only 2 synchro monsters in the extra deck right now, so I'm running this as a 1-of. And plus it's searchable by a certain spell card that I'm running right now. And it has a self-destruct effect if you don't have another magician in your scale. Then it has an effect to summon itself from the hand by reducing an Odd Eyes you control, or an Odd Eyes monster's level by 3 that you control. So, you know, let's say you have Pendulum Dragon on the board, or Phantom Dragon, or any of the other higher than level 3 Odd Eyes monsters on the board. You lower their levels by 3, summon this, and you have an instant level 7 synchro. And then if all the materials you used for the summon were not Odd Eyes cards, you shuffle this card back into your deck. So it's basically summon this, use it for a synchro summon, and if you don't use it for an Odd Eyes Monsters synchro summon, it goes back into your deck. And have fun trying to draw it as one of. I rarely see it, but I mainly want to search it. So yeah. We have a couple more one-ofs. We have Dragon Pulse and Dragon Pit Magician. They're both normal monsters. Dragon Pit can destroy a spell or trap while it's in the skill if you have another magician in your pendulum zone. Right? Yeah, you discard a pendulum monster, target one target one spell or trap card in the field and destroy it. And then this card works on monsters. Target a face-up monster on the field, destroy it at the same cost as Dragon Pit. I run them both at 1 because, again, they're searchable, and it's a 1 to 8 scale, which is really nice. So, yeah. Now for the Crusadia cards. That I know a majority of the monsters is Odd Eyes / Pendulum Magician related. So, I know the ratios might look a bit weird, but there are very few spell cards and there are 0 trap cards. So, first off, we have 3 Crusadia Draco. He basically is Summon Chain Block Magius. And it's, so all of the Crusadias have this effect where you can summon them from your hand in defense position to a zone a link monster points to. And they gain an effect, or they each gain a different effect on field or when they're summoned. Or, in the case of the next one I'm going to cover, a graveyard effect. So, Crusadia Draco lets you add a Crusadia monster from your graveyard back to your hand on summon. So again, it can chain block your Magius search, which is really nice. Come here. And also, if you wanted to try and play guard dragons, you have plenty of dragons to attempt that, but you don't have enough level 4 or lower ones in the deck. Draco and Mirage are the only way, right? It's Mirage. Yeah, Odd Eyes Mirage Dragon are the only level 4 and lower ones in the deck. And I'm not even running Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, which is kind of a mistake, but it's also not a mistake because I'm not really wanting to summon it in this deck too often. Anyways, I digress. Next up, we have 3 copies of Crusadia Arborea. She is a tuner, which is really nice. So if you put her on the board in a level 7, or you put her on the board with like a level 4 in the deck, you can synchro summon for your level 7 monsters. And she has the effect that while she's in the graveyard, you can banish her to basically return to the Dragon Lords any Crusadia monster, which is really nice. And again, Crusadia summon effect. Next up, we have 2 copies of Crusadia Maximus. His effect on board is you can target a link monster you control. If it battles an opponent's monster, it can do double battle damage this turn. So, you know, enables OTKs, and it's just a really good card overall. Again, being able to, you know, slap this card on the board, and then slap something big in the other zone for the for the 1 link monster that gains all the Equimax, and then target Equimax, have it gain a bunch of attack, and then be like, oh, hey, slap over that monster game, is really nice. And then finally, for our Crusadia monsters, we have 2 copies of Crusadia Leonis. He lets you target a Crusadia Link monster you control to give it piercing battle damage for the turn, and that's really all he does. So basically, slap this and Maximus down on the board. Both of them target the same Link monster. It does double piercing battle damage, which is insane to think about. And again, OTK enabling. So yeah, really hefty on the monsters. Majority of the deck is monsters. I mean, look at all that. Look at that. Yeah. But believe me, I have had hands where I've opened almost nothing but spells. It's retarded. Next up, we have 3 copies of Spiral Flame Strike. It lets you search any level 7 level 7 or lower odd eyes, I believe. If you control on a target one card on the field, add to your hand one level 7 odd eyes monster from your deck. Okay. No, it just lets you add a level 7 odd eyes from your deck or face up from the extra deck to your hand. Not a hard once per turn, not once per turn at all. So, you know, activate one. Let's say you open with 2, which I have before. Your opponent goes to Ash is the first one. You just activate the second one, and you get a search. So, it's just your search for any level 7 Odd Eyes monster, and there are plenty in the deck. Next up, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes Fusion. The Odd Eyes Fusion spell, obviously, and I believe it has an effect to be able to use stuff from your extra deck as fusion material if your opponent meets a certain requirement. I'm pretty sure it like controls 2 or more monsters summoned from the extra deck than you do, or something like that. Let me actually check this. Yeah, 2 or more monsters, and you control no monsters. You can use 2 Odd Eyes monsters from your extra deck as fusion material, and you can only activate one of them once per turn. So, hard once per turn on these, but 2 of them is just fine. You're mainly going to be using it to fusion summon from, or using stuff on field to put it in the extra deck, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. Next up, we have 2 copies of Pendulum Call. This is what searches all of your Pendulum Magician monsters. Discard a card, add 2 Magician Pendulum monsters from your deck to your hand, and then it gives all of your scale or Pendulum Magician scales protection from card effect destruction for the turn, which is really, really nice. So I run it at 2 because I'm not really running a whole lot of Pendulum Magicians, but I run enough that a search for 2 of them is really nice. Next up, I have 2 copies of Sky Iris. It's basically a free proc of your Arc Pendulum Dragon, because, you know, target a face-up card you control, or another face-up card you control, destroy it, and then you add an Odd Eyes Performapal, or no, you add an Odd Eyes or a Magician card from your deck to your hand, something like that. And then you can only activate one of those effects per turn, or activate that effect once per turn. Hard once per turn on that. And yeah, so it basically, you target a Pendulum monster you don't want in your an Odd Eyes Pendulum monster in your scale that you don't want there while you have Arc Pendulum. Pop it, you search the scale you want, and then you summon off of Pendulum Dragon in a separate chain. Next up, we have 2 copies of Crusadia Power. It's a quick play spell, so you can activate it from the hand during the battle phase if your opponent tries to like Mirror Force you or something. And you target your Link monster, and so basically you target a Crusadia monster you control, it becomes unaffected by card effects except its own card effects, I believe. Or it's just card effects until the end of the turn. Yeah, except its own, and then you can only activate one of them per turn. I do run Regulex in the extra deck, so you can search this card if you don't open it, and that's, you know, it. And then last card for the main deck, the 1 Terraforming, so that way if you open this and you don't open any of your Sky Iris, you technically open your Sky Iris with this card. So that's it for the main deck. Into the extra deck we go. Starting us off, we have 1 copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. Requires an Odd Eyes monster and a Pendulum monster to be fusion summoned, and is a Omni Negate for shuffling a face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck back into the main deck. So, you know, this card is just insane. It's really good. A lot of Pendulum players play it because, you know, free negation for putting a resource back into your deck. I'll take it. This is a bit of a weird one to be running. I am running Odd Eyes Venom Dragon. So it has a scale effect that once per turn you can target a fusion monster you control, and it gains 1,000 attack for each monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. Then it has a really long monster effect that says, or where it says it must be fusion summoned and can be pendulum summoned once per turn. And then you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase. This card's attack or this card gains attack equal to to its attack, and if it does, this card's name becomes that monster's original name, and you replace its current effect with that monster's effect. And then if this card is in the monster zone is destroyed, you can special summon a monster from your pendulum zone, and if you place this card in your pendulum zone. Really long-winded effect, and its fusion summoning requirements are a starving venom monster and a odd eyes monster, which that's not really hard to do in this deck because I'll get into the next extra deck card, and that's one copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Obviously everybody knows what this does. It's a super poly target, but I'm not running super poly because I don't really have the room in the deck for that. And what it does is it requires 2 dark monsters on the board, and then it just does dumb things. And I'm not really going to get into it because I don't really use this card, nor do I really use this card. But when they come up, it's incredible. And then for a spicy extra deck tech, for the same summoning requirements, except excluding the fact that they have to be on field, Borreload Furious Dragon is also a way to proc your, whatchamacallit, Arc Pendulum Dragon. Because it's a quick effect to destroy a card you control to destroy a card your opponent controls. So, you know, destroy an odd-ice card you control, destroy a card your opponent controls, and then your Arc Pendulum Dragon triggers in a separate chain, summoning another one from the deck. So technically you destroy one of your opponent's monsters for free. And it's just any 2 dark monsters, and there are plenty of dark monsters in the Odd Eyes archetype that you can make this card no problem. And that's it for the fusions, so we're going to get into our synchros. We have 1 copy of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. Whenever it's synchro summoned, you can special summon a monster from your scale, and this card cannot attack that turn, and then it has another effect for battle damage, right? Oh no, it's just when this card is special summoned. You can target a card and special summon it. Also, this card cannot attack for the rest. You can only use this effect of it once per turn, and then monsters in your opponent's possession cannot activate their effects during the battle phase. So it's basically Armades, but for everything, which is nice. And it basically so if you have level 7, it's a synchro summon for an XZ summon, which is really nice. And then another little spicy tech, 1 copy of Clearwing Synchro Dragon, simply because you can negate level 5 or higher monster effects. It's not going to come up very much in the current meta, except against Gene Raiders. This card is really, really good against Gene Raiders, but I don't know how good of a deck I don't know how good that deck is. I know it got some meaty support, or it's getting some meaty support in Eternity Code in the form of a level 4 monster with 2500 base attack that can tag itself out for any level 9 Gene Raider or something like that. Some ridiculous. But you know, any of the other Gene Raider monsters that are level 5 or higher, this thing negates them and then gains their attack, which is nice. So yeah. And that's it for the synchros. Moving on to the XZ's monsters. We're almost done, ladies and gentlemen. Please bear with me. I'm sorry I ramble on so much. But starting us off, we have 1 copy of Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon. It's just a 3K beat stick. If you want to read its effects, be my guest. I never really use it for its effects. I just summon it because it's a 3K beat stick that you can summon back if you can pendulum summon level 7s. Which is just really nice. Next up, we have 1 copy of Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Everybody knows what this card does. It can negate an attack and then summon an Odd Eyes monster out of your graveyard, which is nice. Which means it can also summon back a material, which is nice. And then whenever it dies, it floats into another Odd Eyes monster straight out of the extra deck, which is great because, you know, you can summon this, pop it with Sky Iris, get out your Vortex Dragon for free, get out, nah, I don't think you can get this out. Yeah, it has to be Fusion Summon and then can be special, I don't know. But, you know, you can cheat out your Vortex. You can cheat out a Meteor Burst if you didn't Synchro Summon it. Cheat out any of your Odd-Eyes monsters with this card from the extra deck, just simply by popping it with Sky Iris for a search, which is really good. Next up, we have Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon. A lot. I mean, I used to see this card all the time at my locals. It was basically a staple card in most decks. And then it just dropped off the face of the earth. I'm like, why? This card is actually so good. It cannot die by card effects while it has materials. And, yeah, it can summon a Red Eyes out of the graveyard. Sure. Why would you want to do that? When it has the effect to burn your opponent for 500 points of damage every time they activate a card effect. Which, I saw a really interesting infinite loop with this card. I'm pretty sure everybody in the community knows about it, but it involves Beals. Beals activates whenever you take damage. He gains attack equal to the damage you took. So, you put Flare Metal on the board, you trigger Beals to have them take 500 points of damage. Or you make them take 500 points of damage. Triggers Beals, triggers this card, triggers Beals, triggers this card, triggers Beals, triggers this card. So yeah, if your opponent ever summons Beals, this card wins you the game on an infinite loop. And then lastly, for the Ixies, number 11, Big Eye. It's basically just 2 level 7s to mind control a monster permanently, which is great. So, you know, you can make Big Eye and then steal a monster and then do some other stupid shenanigans, which is really nice. And now finally for the Link monsters, we have 2 copies of Crusadia Magius. This card, whenever something is summoned to a zone it points to, you can search out any Crusadia monster from your deck, add it to your hand, which you can chain block this from being ashed with Crusadia Draco. I'm pretty sure a lot of people know that, but, you know, it just searches, and its summoning requirement is 1 Crusadia monster, because it's a Link 1 with a downward arrow, so, yeah. Next up, we have 1 copy of Crusadia Regulix. He searches your spells and traps in the deck whenever something is summoned to his zone. And all of the Crusadia Link monsters have the same effect, that they gain attack equal to the original attack of what they point to. An emphasis on the original attack. That's really important, because if your opponent lowers your monster's attack, he gains their original attack. Or they all gain their original attack. So, that's that, yeah. And then lastly, we have 2 copies of Crusadia Equimax. He gains attack equal to the original attack of everything he points to, and he can, quick effect, send a Crusadia monster he points to the graveyard to target a face-up card your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn. So it's basically just a free negate, and it's also 2k plus whatever it points to, and it has an upward arrow, so if your opponent summons something above this thing, or you summon this while your opponent has something in a zone above a Link zone that's empty, it's just, let me be bigger, yeah. So anyways, I hope you guys did enjoy the deck profile. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button down below. Be sure to let me know what you think. This is a very casual deck, so don't expect to take this to any events and turbo out wins, because this deck bricks a lot, which is why it's very casual level. So, yeah. But again, if you guys did enjoy, please be sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, please be sure to hit subscribe. I try to bring these out to you guys at least once every week. So, if you guys could, it would be appreciated if, you know, you showed support by, you know, liking, subbing, commenting. I do try to reply to every single comment I can. And I do reply to most of, if not all, comments I have seen recently. A lot of, like, I'm trying to interact with you guys, and I really want this community to grow. We're at 76 subscribers as of recording this video. If we can hit 100 by the end of the year, I will be phenomenally happy. And if you guys surprise me like you did with 75 subs, Jesus,